Hello, everyone. I'm not sure you could hear me. Yes, I have no video, Richard Russell. There we go. Hello, I am Victor DeRenzi, Artistic Director of Sarasota Opera. I am here with our cast of Dido and Aeneas. We are all in London. We're at the Savoy Hotel. We had a very nice day at the National Gallery, but it is back. We will be back in Sarasota tomorrow. It's raining a bit in London, but that's okay. We'll have sunshine here. Well, actually, we are all talking to you from our respective homes at the moment. And I would like to introduce to you all the members of our production, and I'll ask them to say a little bit about themselves and their Sarasota Opera. So let me first go to Maestro Jesse Martin.
Hello, I'm Maestro Jesse Martins. I'm the Youth Opera Music Director for Sarasota Opera. And most recently in the 2019 season, I conducted the Magic Flute.
And now Martha Collins.
There we go. Hello, everybody. So excited to be back working on opera again. I've been here since 2004, and I've been loving doing this production of Dido, directing.
And our, let's do Aeneas, Andrew Surrena. How are you?
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be back in sunny Sarasota. My first year here was 2014, but I was last seen as Romeo and in 2019 season. And this year I'm performing the role of Aeneas in Dido and Aeneas. So thank you for having me.
And our Dido, Lisa Chavez.
Hello. Like everyone else, I'm very happy to be back in Sarasota and singing. And my first season here was 2017 with Dialogues of the Carmelites. And I've been here involved in Carmen and Nabucco and Romeo and Juliet as well. And happy to be back.
So I think Maestro Jesse is in his office, and I think Martha is also in the office.
No, I'm at Steinwachs.
Steinwachs, as is Andy and Lisa. So thanks to our Steinwachs artist residents, we are able to house everyone, and it's one of the reasons that we can actually do opera this year. So I want to talk a little bit about, I would like you to talk about the kind of piece we're doing, because opera, people tend to specialize in opera, especially when you have this divide between very early music and more modern music. People tend to be so-called Baroque specialists. And that was not always the case. The first time I got to hear the opera was a recording with Kirsten Flagstad, who was one of the great Wagnerian sopranos. So how do we deal with, let's talk a little about you and doing this opera at Sarasota Opera. We have certainly not made our reputation doing early music. We've made our reputation doing romantic opera. So here we are making something work that's very different than what people may think of as the aesthetic of the company. Although after you talk, I'm sure they will realize that we are all within the aesthetic of the company. So let me turn that over first to the singers. Lisa?
I guess I feel that opera is opera, and you try to sing it in the voice that you have, and you do with it what your instrument can do with it. And I think that with this opera in particular, there's a lot of the traditional opera themes of angst and love and betrayal, and that's most important to me in conveying the story, I think.
How about you, Andy?
Well, you know, coming here, I've been here since 2014 now, and I've come up through as an apprentice and studio artist, and now, you know, it's an honor to be a principal artist. But when you've been in Sarasota so long, you can't help but fall in love with all the romantic operas and the aesthetic of Sarasota. And so, you know, when we were offered these roles, one of the things we were told is we want you to use your full voices, the voices we've heard on the stage before. And so that was a relief to hear that a lot of times the Baroque operas, you you kind of try to be more delicate, or you don't want to use vibrato, you know, your full voice. And so when we were going for more of a romantic style of this kind of opera, it was really, you know, it allowed me to free up my voice and sing the role as I'd hoped to.
So let me explain to those of you who may not know. Vibrato is a pitch fluctuation that singers use or don't use depending on many things. When the piece, what the aesthetic is of the period, what singers sang certain music, and it's also very questionable as to what was the appropriate vibrato, even though it's written about a lot. Nobody really knows how that was in the 1680s. All those records seem to have been destroyed. When we lost our turntables, we lost all the recordings from 1680s. Let's go to Martha. What about you?
Well, I personally have always preferred a full, free, emotional sound. And I find that many singers, I'm sure there's exceptions, but many singers in trying to sing in a Baroque style hold back on their voice and whiten their sound, so that to me it's not as powerful an emotional statement as if they were singing with their full voice. So it's never as satisfying for me. Years ago, when I was a singer in my previous life, I was in a Baroque opera at the Canadian Opera Company. And they brought in a specialist to coach us, and he's getting us to do all this white singing, and we're looking at each other in puzzlement. And then Lotfi Mansouri, the head of the company, showed up and he said, "Oh no, I don't want any of that. I want real singing." And so that's what we did. And I think when you have a piece as great as Dido, there's a reason it's lasted all these centuries. It can be sung in this full-throated emotional way because the harmonies are rich and the emotional statement is rich. So for me, it completely works this way.
It's very interesting. Go ahead, Maestro Jesse. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with everything that has been said. I did a lot of research in preparing for Dido, and as you go and learn the music, you play and you sing along, there's so much beauty in it that, to me, to take half of a singer's voice away from that, you know, palette of expression, it's a bit of a crime, in my opinion. Even more because, you know, our orchestra is a modern orchestra. It's not a Baroque specialized ensemble. Even our tuning, because our harpsichord is a modern instrument, is a 440 tuning, which is the standard of modern. So I totally agree with everything that everybody said, and it's been very rewarding to actually hear Dido fully sung.
It's very interesting that you all answered my question about singing. So let me just say before we go on that Richard is making me laugh. It's okay. That if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box below and we'll answer them later. So what about preparing this score? Let me go to you, Maestro and Martha, because one of the questions that comes up most often from our audience, because I think people know that we at Sarasota Opera have great respect for the score and for what the composer and the librettist wrote, want to know actually what was written. And I think if you don't understand the history of music, if you just love music and not really study it in that way, it's very hard to explain that music was not very notated in depth, and then over the last 400 years became extremely notated and extremely, every detail in the music is there. But tell me what we're dealing with, Maestro, to start with musically. What are we dealing with when we talk about doing what the composer wrote?
It's with Dido, it's very tricky because there are no surviving autographs on Handel's writing. Sorry, Purcell. I was like, Handel. And which makes it harder because the manuscripts that survived are from many decades after the opera was premiered. So, and like Maestro, like you were saying, the notation of ornamentation or phrasing was not something that composers wrote down, and it was up to the singers, each individual singer, to decide and contribute on how they heard this melody and how they would vary it. So it's a little hard because, you know, with other composers, we have the primary source and we can, you know, we have critical editions, and it's very, you know, there's a lot of information there. And with Purcell, I found it very complicated to find reliable information, and even musicologists have been, you know, arguing and back and forth for many decades about many specific ways of interpreting it. So it was complicated to put it together, but you know, like any other work, it's music. So I think we react a lot to what's on the page, although we don't have that historical, you know, from Purcell's hand.
One of our questions just came in from Roseanne, who wants to know what instruments we're using. Are we using traditional Baroque?
We are using modern instruments, and it's a string orchestra with a harpsichord.
And it's only strings, so there's nothing else in it. And
Yeah.
okay, Martha, to you with the question, with the materials.
Well, there really, as Jesse said, there really aren't any. And you, of course, I read the Iliad or the Aeneid rather, that it's the story is taken from, and you read historical context that Purcell was dealing with. For example, we have the original libretto exists, and there was a whole prologue that had been written to go with this, and none of the music of that exists, but it is interesting to read what all of that was. But what is so great about this work is the story is so wonderful that even though so much reference material doesn't exist, the story holds so beautifully on its own. So we're fortunate that way. There's not huge holes in making sense of the story because we don't have original materials.
And what about the two of you? What Andy, what about you, singing early music, and you just go with it, I guess, right? As
Well,
you said.
yeah, I mean, definitely, you just go with it, of course.
How
But
about preparing the role? Do you do it any differently? Or did you, I know Maestro made a lot of suggestions for embellishments. So for those of you who may not know, embellishments are things that are not written in the score, but that performers add and have added over the years. And so I know Maestro prepared some embellishments for you. And how did you deal with that?
well, as a singer, I find embellishments really freeing because you're able to, you know, find different musical ideas and phrases that work really well with your voice and that sound best, you know, for you as an individual with your own voice. And one of the things I just was thinking is with Aeneas is so interesting and kind of odd. I'm a tenor. I sang Romeo, which is, you know, high up their tenor role. But a lot of baritones sing Aeneas, and it's kind of written in this gray area where a lot of guys can sing it with their voices, you know, kind of like a church hymn. And so it gave me a lot of ideas of how to sing in the lower register, because some of it is a lot lower than, you know, the Romeo was, and how to keep that as kind of intense and, you know, full and rich as some of the other, you know, upper register notes that I'm more used to singing as a tenor.
Lisa?
Kind of to tag on what Andy said, I think Dido also is kind of in this middle area where sopranos also sing it very often. It's different than Aeneas because his part is particularly low, especially for the tenor voice. And then Dido is a little bit on the higher end for a mezzo, but sopranos sing it as well. It has just, I think maybe the range of all of it is just a little bit more condensed and more even. So the embellishments make it that much more important because you can show off your particular voice versus someone else's voice who sings it. And it was wonderful getting the notes from Maestro Jesse before we began, because even within that, he said, you know, try these out, but if you have other ideas, please bring them to the table and we can discuss. And so first music rehearsals, we did discuss the differences of, you know, which ones we would want to take or which we thought didn't particularly fit our voice the best, or other options, and kind of work through that and decide together. And that's, I think, what's very helpful with that, those early music rehearsals, is finding the voice of your character and settling that early on. So then everything builds from there.
So Martha, you took your material, consists of the score and obviously the libretto. So you took very little information and had to create quite a bit of staging with it. You want to talk about that a little? And
certainly one of the big challenges with this being in a bubble, as you all know, we're in this bubble, and Maestro and Richard, of course, have been fantastic about coming up with a plan to keep us all safe. But it meant that I have 12 people in my ensemble to do all of the different character chorus roles. And most productions would have dancers or supers, so that, and often the chorus is just a Greek chorus on the side, but I have 12. And so one of the big challenges was how to get these people to change 6 times in 30 seconds to become witches, to become court people, to become sailors, to become. So we had, that was a first big thing, was how to figure that out, so that there just wouldn't be a huge amount of empty time on stage. So I had a lot of fun with Howard Kaplan making all of that work, and also where we have all but 2 have been apprentices here, and so we've already established over the years of language, and we know how these people work. We know they're enthusiastic, so they have thrown themselves into being witches, into being courtiers, into being drunken sailors. So it's been a really satisfying, fun rehearsal process to put it all together.
oh, we'll get back to Puccini and Verdi soon. It's all there. Then you have a different problem. You got to do what's there. So a question came up, has come up about language. So first of all, it's interesting doing an opera in English, because you don't just do an opera in English. We all have different accents. We all have different ways of pronouncing words. How much, our conductor is Brazilian, so he has his very charming accent, but offers a
I have
little.
my Canadian accent.
You have your Canadian. And so how did you go about establishing the kind of English we would do? We're not doing British English. We're certainly not going to the shores of Brooklyn for pronunciation. So how did that come? Maestro and Martha, I think it came through you.
Yeah, we decided on a generic American accent, like so undefinable as any area. It would have been pretentious, I think, for all of us to try to put on some British rolled R thing that would have sounded like we were coming from 30 different places of Britain anyway. So so we wanted a very natural approach.
And English is a challenged language to sing in. I mean, Lisa and Andrew, you can probably chime in, but as an opera singer, you probably don't sing a lot in English, right? Even though it's your main language, you know. And for me, not being a native English speaker definitely has its challenges, and it's a difficult language to sing, because it's not as lyrical as Italian or as French. If anything, it's closer to German in the sense that there are a lot of consonants. But I'm still trying to, you know, learn English for real. My vowels are all over the place. So Andy and Lisa can help with that.
It's tricky, Maestro. I don't blame you. There's a lot of different vowel sounds in English that, as a singer, you have to negotiate. You know, Italian, you have the five vowel sounds, and it's all open and beautiful. But in English, you know, sometimes it's really tricky to get the right word across. So for me as a singer, a lot of times what I do is I just open, and you know, if you live next to me, I'm really sorry, but I just like to kind of call out and say my words so that if anybody across, you know, Manhattan, they could understand what I'm saying. And that helps me to keep my throat open, my enunciation, you know, crisp and clean, so that everybody in the audience hopefully can understand the story and the text, because I think that's very important.
It is somewhat archaic English. There are a few words here and there that are not common usage, but the story is very understandable.
And just to clarify, we don't think there's anything wrong with the British accent. It was just a decision that was made because we are in America and we're, you know, most singers are. So it was the way to be understood, I think. And as Martha's saying, with the amount of archaic words, I think we made a good choice.
Well, also, Robert Gilder, yes, there is nothing wrong with the British accent unless it's really bad imitations of one.
Well, I think you also made a very good point, Martha, in like, what is a British accent? People all over Britain have different accents, and our way to unify that would be to go to English as good as we can. Lisa, you want to say anything about that?
English is extremely hard to sing in. I have actually a lot of roles on my resume that are English operas, and I think the difficulty with English is the diphthongs and even triphthongs, that you have the multiple vowels, and and deciding how much weight you put on each one. In Italian, it's very clear that if there is two vowels on a note, which is the stronger and which is the weaker, and often it's even written within the score of which has the longer note. But in English, you kind of set with your own devices to figure out how you want to portray it. And oftentimes you'll listen to people sing in English and you do need the super titles or the subtitles, because it's very hard to decipher, especially on a long note, feeling out where the weight was, where the weight is in the sentence. And so even though we speak English fluently, it's a lot of work to make sure that it's understood and clear, and the sentence makes sense. Going back to what Martha was saying about the archaic language itself, it's an older piece. We don't use some of these words anymore, and so trying to make sense of a sentence, it just takes more thought and more work to make that come together and make sense for the audience, I think.
Yeah, Catherine Benoit asked if there will still be surtitles. Yes, and surtitles in English is a very complicated issue because your timing is different. When you deal with a translation of something, what I try to do with the surtitles is give you enough information so that you could actually watch the stage rather than reading all the time. With the timing with the English surtitles is to try to keep it more with what is being said at the moment. Also, our theater is very difficult to hear English in. I don't know why. It's always been the case. English is very hard to understand in the theater, which is another reason that we have surtitles. And it's unfortunate that we have to do that because I think audiences have become passive listeners. But in these days with surtitles, I don't think there is a company that does not do surtitles in English opera.
And I think also, you know, on top of being a little archaic, librettos of operas are usually written in poetic form. So there is a rhyme scheme, and depending on the character, in Dido, for instance, the sorceress text is much simpler in terms of poetic inversion. So you get the full meaning of the sentence straight away. But a character like the false Mercury talks in very poetic sentences, which makes it even harder to get the full meaning of the sentence. So that's some of the complications.
On first listening, it's very hard.
Yes.
The super titles help.
So I have a question that has come up for Lisa, and I'm going to read this directly, Lisa. Lisa, you look gorgeous.
Thank you.
How do you interpret the role of Dido as a victim of fatal love and destiny? In the poem, as you know, she commits suicide. Is this an act of courage and honor? This person, this anonymous attendee, finds her a complicated character. She certainly is.
Yes, thank you, Anonymous. I would say the way I've come about it for myself as interpreting Dido is that she is so settled into what the fates have decided that is her decision to commit suicide is through this idea of fate, that fate has decided for Aeneas that he needs to go, and she emotionally is very hurt, but then on top of that thinks that above all that this is her fate, that this is the fate of her and her reign, basically.
And also I saw the next question, which is, did Aeneas really love Dido? And in my opinion, yes, he did. I mean, he is the Trojan warrior who has his fate is to find sail to Italy, and that's his destiny, right? And up until the false Mercury that in the opera comes via the sorceress, he is decided to stay with Dido. And then when the Mercury, the messenger of the gods, tells him that it's time to go and you have to fulfill your fate, your destiny, that's when the decision is made for him. But I think Purcell also showed that in the way that he wrote Aeneas's exit of Act 2, as he learns that he must leave. He has a very beautiful little arioso at the end where we understand that he would like to stay and that he loves Dido very much.
Yeah,
You want to respond to that, Andy, as well?
Say it's Aeneas's little chance to shine there, but yeah, I definitely think Aeneas does love Dido, and you have to remember this is a story that takes place during a time when you don't question the gods. You don't say no when a god shows up and tells you have to go do this thing. And so I think it is really tough for Aeneas, and he understands that despite what his heart is telling him, he just has to go and fulfill his destiny. And so yeah,
We talk about destiny a lot. What is destiny? What is fate in this opera? Maybe we want to think
what
about
the gods tell you to do.
The gods and family heritage. So Aeneas has to save the Trojan race after they've been destroyed after the Trojan War. So his duty is to his lineage.
So here we go. We'll be back soon to many of the kinds of operas we did. We'll be in the realms of Bizet and Gounod and Verdi and Puccini. What have you learned doing a piece like this that will influence how you perform coming up?
For me, because it's a simpler score in the sense that the texture is simpler, it showed me or reminded me of the importance of harmony and how with very little you can still create a very dramatic music, be it happy or sad or angered. But when you study a score that is in a way simplified compared to Puccini and Verdi and Mozart, it really showed me that harmony in itself can be very expressive and beautiful.
Martha, you?
That would make me do things differently or inform me. I think, well, it's a simple answer, but everything I do informs your next show. I'm just always learning and adding on to to things. I mean, it's been such a joy, you know, in this COVID time to be in the room again and collaborating and laughing and crying and discussing. And so I just feel that all of us who are in the arts are so, we've had our love of this art form, not that it was dead, but its validity to us has been rejuvenated, and its necessity to us because of potentially, like we lost last season, and so I think that's the biggest thing for me, to treasure every moment of this and any future ones coming up because of the past year.
Andy, what about you? You're generally you love romantic music, as you said, and how does this affect, what do you think? Take any of this with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of ideas that come to mind. Some of them are the idea of, you know, a little bit more freedom, a little more play with the music that you're able to do with the Baroque style, where we're doing ornamentations. And when you know, the opera's called Dido and Aeneas, but really Aeneas is kind of the fourth largest role in the show. There's three women that are very prominent, and taking on this role and finding ways to make it more interesting, even though like there's not many pages of music, you can still find different ways of coloring it, different challenges of how to portray this character that, you know, might not get the stage time that some of the other characters get to develop and to understand. And, you know, also I've worked with Martha a lot in this opera. I've gotten used to playing these kind of, you know, lovesick, poetic, artsy characters, where Aeneas is more of a king, and he's, you know, he leads nations, he leads armies, and having that kind of a presence of a leader, of a king, of a, you know, of a man, kind of a pillar on stage, and having that inform future roles and, you know, different ideas and presence on stage as well.
Lisa?
Well, this is a fantastic role. I was very excited to be asked to sing this, especially coming out, or still in the end, hopefully, of this COVID-ness. Singing this, I mean, there's the icon, the really fantastic aria that everyone knows from this opera, and this opera doesn't get performed all that often, particularly probably because of the length of it, that it's a shorter opera, and what to pair it with. And if you were to do it for a larger scale production. So I just am very pleased and happy to have the chance to sing it. And then also, like what Martha said, singing it in this time, being in the room with people, being on the stage with an audience. It's just, I don't have the words.
So I have two questions, and I guess I'm going to give this to you, Martha, because they're both about intermission, which we don't have, and scene changes. I mean, it's very strange. I was thinking today, this is called an opera in 3 acts, which would give us about, 3 20-minute acts. A lot of time to sell stuff at the bars, certainly.
Yes.
So the question is, how difficult is it with no intermission, and how the music works during the scene change? And I think, yes, go ahead, Martha.
Music is nonstop. Yes, it's not through composed. I mean, in that there are different numbers, but one leads right into the other. And we really did not want to stop. So I mentioned, you know, Howard coming up with ways for these costume changes to happen as quickly as possible. And they're all down to less than 30 seconds. But so are all the set changes, all happen in that same 30 seconds when people run off the stage and are throwing things. So are new drops coming in. And that's where we're so grateful for the wealth of hidden things away in the warehouse, because all of the set has been pulled from stock. All of the drops that come in to create the palace, the cave, the witch's cave, the seashore, what's our other scene? The Grove, are all from stock, and they all fly in beautifully. And this set, the production looks different than anything else I've done here. It has a wonderful, clear and yet spareness that sort of alludes to a classical theater setting at the Globe, for example, in London or something. Very simple, almost no furniture, because my same 12 people are moving whatever furniture so that they only have the same 30 seconds to move furniture and change clothes. So it was a fantastic puzzle to put together. I have an amazing stage management team who make all of these set changes look simple, and Ken Yunker has done a spectacular job. One, finding the set. Ken Yunker and I and Scott Keklik, our TD, we went to the warehouse and climbed over things to find things to put together. So I'm really pleased with how quickly and smoothly it flows from one scene to the next. It would really, with each scene being so short and intimate, it would really spoil the continuity of the show if there was any big pause for a set change. So because it flows from one to the next, it really keeps the action of the opera intense and flowing.
When you consider how much of the set is stationary, because when we're talking about changing the set, you don't want to, we could not have 20 people backstage moving scenery around. That would not have been the best thing for COVID, times of COVID. But when the set does change, because of the backdrops that we were able to pull from stock, and also because of Ken Yunker's beautiful lighting and Howard's costumes and the work that you've done, it's like you're in a different place as much as it can be, I think.
It really, each set really does seem very different. It's great. And then the lighting creates that. And
I'm going to read the nice things. Thank you, Sarasota Opera, for finding a way. The operas that you have offered this year during the time of COVID are delightful. I'm glad you appreciate them. It took a lot of care and time. I mean, normally to do an opera, you have to figure out what opera you could do and find the money to do it. This was really a few levels beyond that, with not only can we do it, but can we do it safely? That became a major event for us. And we are thoroughly enjoying them, especially Il Signor Bruschino. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And a great Zoom program. I kind of like this on Zoom. I hope you all do too. I think it's a very nice way to get to so many of you without having to yell to the back of the opera house. And I'm enjoying these. I'm enjoying being on Zoom. Anyone else have anything to say? And I think I've answered all of your questions out there. And we have to get back from London. We will leave our Savoy Hotel early in the morning, and we have a performance tomorrow night of Dido. If you are not coming to the opera, please stream it. Please stream it. People have said very much they enjoyed what they saw of our first two operas. It's not like being in the opera house, but then nothing in the world is like being in the opera house. So please enjoy it while you have this, and then come back and be with us. Thank you.
are we?
Yes, thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Enjoy the opera, everyone. Bye.